order. Roll call. Looks like everybody's good.
Yep, all present, 7-0. Everyone's here. You know, minutes, we said the pledge once already, twice this month, so we'll skip that. Items for discussion. Hiring and board policy 533.
Yep, we have before the board policy 533, which is an opportunity just for you to review and suggest any revision if necessary. It's on the hiring of professional staff, and it was revised in 2013, I believe, was the last time. And we've had a chance to review the policy and the hiring process. I would believe this policy was followed to a T. But with that, it gives an opportunity for us to just reflect on the criteria that we use for hiring, and if there's any questions, comments, concerns about the hiring process, this would be a good time for us to review the policy.
I think Julie brought up at the last meeting the whenever feasible language was maybe too vague for providing guidance to administration, that there's no parameters around it. Did you happen to look at the WASB policies on this?
I believe this was originally a WASB policy, but if it's been updated, I have not looked at the updated.
Yeah,
Is there some more?
there's like 3 different options.
Okay.
I don't remember seeing anything about involvement of parents, but you know, maybe to have a full discussion, we should
Put it out there.
before the board the 3 sample policies from WASB.
Sure. Sounds like a good place to start. I will bring those back for further discussion.
And if it makes sense, we can have a policy committee meeting on it. I don't know, you know, maybe next week we'll have a better idea of whether we're going to have a policy meeting on more than just this.
Because we certainly have other policies that we're
Yeah.
looking at right now. So.
Maybe have a meeting between the November and December board
Right.
meetings.
Okay.
Wrap this into it.
Sure, I will set that up.
Lisa, did any of those policies recommend board members ever being involved?
You know, I looked at it like last week and I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe so. I mean, I think it's the board has the authority, and the board also has the authority to delegate this. And it seems like we have delegated this responsibility in that we're not, and have not asked to be, on any of the hiring committees. So I think it's a board's prerogative.
To that point, Jeff, Matt and I had a discussion, and typically in the districts that I know of with policy around this area, they separate those that are on the selection process from those that are on the final approval process. And one of the solutions might be that if a board member wishes to be on the selection process, then they would just recuse themselves from the final approval process, so they're not selecting the candidate and making the final approval at a board level. So that might be a way to allow board members to participate, but not also then have influence on the final determination.
And my feeling is that, you know, if our process is clear, that we may not need a board member, or that may not be necessary. But I think what's unclear is how they're chosen, how the committee is chosen. And I have also asked to see licenses and credentials, and I do not think that that's unreasonable to ask. I would like to know what the certification is. You know, I want to see the license, I want to see if it's K through 12. I don't think that's unreasonable at all for us to ask and see that, especially when we're approving a contract.
Sure. And typically, per policy, we bring forward the salary schedule and where they would be placed, and any other, I think the policy says any other pertinent information that the board wishes or requires, so that would certainly be easy enough to provide. So happy to do it.
I also think there needs to be some discussion on giving you parameters for when you are interviewing and offering somebody a position. I don't think that we should be at the tail end. If you've offered somebody $60,000, for example, and we think that's way out of line, I think we ought to be saying, Luke, you have a 40 to 45,000 window, or 45 to 50, whatever. But I think that's something that the board should be deciding, or at least giving you guidance on.
Mhm.
Or informed before it
Yeah.
comes through.
I mean, because if you offer somebody 60,000 and we just think that's out of line, then we're at the point where
No.
we have no recourse.
Capture that, I'll put that into our policy discussion when we get together.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll move on. Approval of staff hire.
So before the board is a recommended approval of Tom Ingwell to a 1.0 physical education teacher position. I know there were some questions, and this was tabled at our last regular meeting so that Matt could be present to speak to the process if he had some questions around that. So I invite Matt to join us at the table if you don't mind, and kind of walk us through maybe the process used to select a candidate, and we'll take some questions from the board.
To select the candidate. So, do you want to start with just the selection committee, the selection?
Yeah, once you start maybe walking the board through the selection of the committee and the
Sure.
process to make the hire.
So, following the board policy, I've done this since I've been here. We look at teachers, staff, as parents as well, whenever feasible. The first time we hired Katie Hughes. I did ask a couple of parents to be involved in that, and they were unable to. We had primarily a primary team that was involved in that. With this time, the FIAD position, I first asked the FIAD department, which just makes sense. So Quinn and Scott were the first two people available. I also wanted to get a person from the specials area. We had a candidate who had some connection with our art teacher, so she couldn't have been a part of it. So I ended up asking Jeff David to be a part of the team. I also asked Brooke McGraw, just with some of her background in leadership, instructional coach, and as well as giving the classroom teaching perspective. I thought she'd be a good candidate. Then Vicki Dahl, just by a position often comes with coaching responsibilities, or they seek that. So I thought it'd be important to have Vicki on that team. And then finally, Mike had made it known to Luke, and then Luke had made it known to me that Mike Wagner was interested in being on the committee as well. So that was how we comprised our 7 team members. I drafted, I think, 12 or 13 questions, all related to the whole position, what it entails, questions around that. I really wanted to focus in on a couple of things. First, just development of lessons that are differentiated for many types of learners. That's something that we've seen through the strategic planning, the whole child. That was important to me as well as to the rest of the staff and the kids. Trying to grow the program in terms of adaptive physical education. So how do you work with kids who have special needs? That's something I really wanted to see better developed. So that was also a priority for me. So some of the questions came around that, is how do you work with kids with different needs? And I think just collaboration. How well did they work with others? Can they plan together? And that comes back to the PLCs. So that's how I developed my questions. During the process itself, I asked all the questions. I let everyone else just kind of listen, sit in. I encouraged them to, if you had any questions during any of the process, just chime in with a second follow-up question, and they did. We didn't have a lot. They all did a pretty good job of responding to the questions.
So why have a committee if you don't encourage them to ask questions?
I did encourage them to ask questions. I said follow up with other questions if they have, to follow up on the questions themselves. So they were encouraged to follow up with any question I had initially posed. They would. And that's pretty typical of hiring process. You have a set number of questions. So.
And were they familiar with the questions, the committee, or just you?
Well, we all had a chance to sit down and look at them, and I know Quinn had said something about when we first got started, do you want to put this in there? So they had a chance to review them. So that was pretty much it in terms of the questions. They also responded, you saw the documents there, responded to a question around applying a lesson to a specific classroom that had certain needs, and just how would you respond and bring in different ideas and creative ways to approach those kids so that met the needs of all learners. So everyone had access to those the day before we made the decision. I didn't hear anything back from, actually it was that morning, and I said, please get back to me as soon as possible with your thoughts on the responses to the writing. I did have another, I would say a special education expert, look at the writings of the candidates we felt strongly about, and the candidate that we proposed to you, we felt she also identified that person as having a pretty strong lesson plan. So I did a lot of reference checks that day. I checked every reference. One was unavailable, principal, but the assistant principal I spoke with said, whatever I'm sharing with you, this person's going to concur with. And we work very closely together. So I checked every reference. I checked references beyond the listed references. You tend to obviously pick people in your corner. So I did call around to other educators that I knew, community members, and just said, tell me more about this person. With each reference, I said, hey, tell me the good and the bad. Tell me about the chinks in the armor. I said, what's something this person needs to work on? Not to look negatively upon this person, but what do they need to work on? We all need to work on something. So just saw lots of trends as I talked to each person, looked back on their notes, looked at how they answered questions. At the end of the process, each member had a chance to just share who they felt were the strongest candidates. And that was something we agreed was going to remain confidential, wouldn't be shared out just because of all the connections in a small community. We felt that was important. So I heard all of them, and then I believe on Saturday we decided on our final candidate. It was either Friday evening or Saturday. I have to look at my notes, but I believe it was Friday evening actually. So, yeah.
Thank you. What questions do you have for Matt about the process?
Well, I think the elephant in the room is the process. To have, I listened this weekend, and to have a new hire on the hiring committee when there are senior members in your school that have a scope of history with the school, and you had a very new young teacher on there, on the hiring committee.
Broke.
Yes. And the other elephant in the room is that a parent asked to be on there, and Mike's here tonight, so I'm just going to say it. Mike has a business relationship with the person who you hired through the contract, and a friendship. And appearances are everything. And if you didn't vet that or think about that, the public does. That's the major thing. And it doesn't make the process transparent. It didn't feel transparent.
I will allow comment, Mike and Joe and Tim. Let's go around the board first. Sure.
Any questions, Jeff or Laddie, or?
I was just commenting, I've heard the same comments that Kelly was speaking of. And I could have asked you beforehand, but I don't think they would be the same ones. But number.
I've only had one for, probably 9, 10, not 4. There's only one that was on the street before.
Do you have any questions about the process though, Laddie?
I don't know. I think In my opinion, yes. I don't think anybody should be given a job till it comes here at one time. Yeah. And apparently this one, I hadn't heard it, but most of them heard it. They said long before it was out.
Say that again?
A lot of people downtown heard that he was getting a job long before it was ever given to him.
Is it customary to let the candidate know they have a job before the school board approves it?
Yes.
You make an offer.
I think you have to make sure they're gonna take it.
Right, you can offer something that I wouldn't want.
And
Or
when you-
concern of the candidate?
You say it's subject to school board approval.
Absolutely.
Sure.
No, I mean, I don't have any questions. I think that one of the calls I had last week was just that I think that there is just a lot of talk about this, and people are hearing about things before. I think it's unfortunate. I'm not quite as, I mean, there's always going to be sort of impressions or thoughts on the process, but I don't know how this one kind of got away from people, but I mean, I think the process, I think we're doing the right thing by looking at it, so we can give clear guidelines to help our administrators know exactly what they, you know, are supposed to be within in terms of the fence that we're giving them. So I think we're on the right track by getting this on our agenda.
And I think it's smart to go back to the policy, and I think looking at the policy, so if they have any concerns, it's reflected there.
Were there any internal qualified people in the school?
Meaning people who are currently working who wanted it.
Right.
No one applied.
And I guess, and I don't know how you communicate this, but we like to know, it's helpful for me to know what your vision is, and maybe that's clear stated of what kind of, you know, who you wanted for this position. It's easier for us to maybe answer questions, or at least know what your vision is. And we're not mind readers, you know, there's things that we don't know. It's your building, it's your staff, and I think that through this process, you know, maybe that could be maybe clearer. I mean, without us, I don't want to get in on your selection. As I said before, I think the main process, that the elephant in the room is that someone has to be on there with a business contract and a personal relationship. And that just doesn't sit well.
Lisa? More comments?
I mean, you know, Mike's a real estate broker in town, he's probably represented half the town, probably more than that. And, you know, if friendship counts as a conflict, then we all have conflicts all the time. And, you know, we're not the experts, we have experts, they're the administrators. I don't see that, that the administration did anything to run afoul of the policy that we currently have, and which we all agree would benefit by being rewritten. All these policies, you know, could be rewritten. But I don't feel comfortable second guessing our experts who we delegated this responsibility to. So I will support Matt's pick and this committee's pick. There was a process, and they went through the process, and you explained some goals that you were looking at, and you're in a far, far better position to assess these candidates than for the school board to swoop in at this point and second guess it. To me, that would be extremely counterproductive.
But Matt didn't ask Mike, Mike called to ask to be in the hiring committee. So then there's a vetting process.
And I could have said no.
Mike's an involved parent. He volunteers to help the school in a multitude of ways.
Mike served on the district safety committee.
Yeah, there's a line of communication. So,
Well, it can't be a singular pipeline either.
oh, I'm sorry, what?
It can't be just a singular pipeline either through Mike.
And
Yeah, I'm in Lisa's boat. I mean, I think we have an excellent staff here because we have trusted our administrators to do the hiring. I mean, I think if you look at the staff we've hired this year so far, you know, I checked with Luke and all reports are fantastic so far on all of the new hires. You know, and this seemed to become a hot button issue and all of a sudden, you know, we don't just, you know, I got some inquiries and I replied, I'm gonna back the administration's choice, you know. I got inquiries on Mike and I asked the question about his involvement, and to me, that's separate from the choice. If we wanna make policy or issue of someone's inclusion, I mean, at the end of the day, he's still only 1/7 of the committee, and it still comes down to match choice. I mean, so whether we like his involvement or not, to me, is separate from the selection. And if we want to change policy or encourage Matt to vet more, look into more, find out why people are asking to be on committees, maybe there is some, you know, not everybody's honest. I'm not saying in this situation that's the case, but to me, that's separate from the candidate choice. And I don't know why we're digging deeply into the candidate choice and not just the process. And I'm a little disappointed the way this has played out with some of our staff and some of the things that I've continued to hear. We're better than this, than how this has dragged down our districts better. I mean, I think it's just been mishandled from the get-go by the community.
I do got some comments, but I'll save them until after I hear from our guests. Mike, you had your hand up.
Well, I have a lot of things I want to say, or I'm going to say, that I feel that was confidential, and I feel like you might want to be in closed session before I say it. Otherwise, I mean, Matt told us the stuff that was said in that room was confidential, and I am going to say some of it now, so.
I think if it's going to involve particular candidates, then I do think it should be a closed session. I mean, we've been very careful to not do that, and to talk about the process.
Does it pertain to the process, the selection process, or does it pertain to the individual candidates?
Nothing about the individual.
Okay. If it's just about the process, that's what we're talking about here. Keep names out of it, will you, please?
I can't. There's going to be names involved, so. But I mean, I've been getting phone calls too, like you guys. So, you know, there's going to be names
Suggest we
involved.
move into closed session with Mike, but
Could we
let's
hear
see
from-
if there's somebody else that wants.
We will, man, sure. Tim or Joe?
Question's more on candidate and qualifications. For those of you who don't know.
I think if it's the candidate and the qualifications of the candidate, then I think we've got to go into closed session. I don't think it's appropriate.
No.
I mean,
Okay.
we don't want the, you know, getting a job in Mineral Point shouldn't mean that you have to go through some terrible public grilling process when you're not even present to defend yourself. So,
Joe, if you leave
Definitely.
names out of it, you can ask your question. Well, we can't.
It's tough, I don't wanna overstep a boundary or anything, I'd rather wait.
Just a second, we can't go into closed session with an audience either.
right.
I don't want to do that and talk about individual candidates, can't man. I mean, we're sworn board members, not that
Oh,
you're
yeah.
any less important, Joel,
No, I understand.
for sure.
You have to watch your P's and Q's, I understand
Yeah.
that.
And we can have general discussion. If you got a question about the candidate or the chosen candidate,
I could talk to you about, because we had more applicants than we had candidates. So I could talk to you a little bit about how I came to that approach. Is that all right?
I guess,
I'll go and share that. So we had 16 candidates apply. Because of my focus on making sure we had someone who's qualified to adapt for a variety of kids, a variety of reasons. And this teacher works with every kid in the school. So they've got to be able to adapt to a variety of personalities, they've got to be organized. I mean, you know about the state's issues, they got to be able to get stuff up, get stuff down, plan ahead. So for me, the first threshold was, did they have adaptive certification? If they didn't, they didn't make the cut. So that means they've got on top of their FIAT position, they've got adaptive certification. Then the next thing to look at was experience. I mean, did they have experience in the schools? Every candidate did. Those are my two main criteria.
How important is their current experience to you?
Very.
It's interesting, because one of the candidates I know hasn't taught FIAT for 7+ years. So if being current in the field is something you want to talk about, wouldn't teaching it in the last 7 years be important? You wouldn't go to a doctor that hasn't practiced medicine for 7 years.
Are we talking about a specific candidate now or no?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that would be more of a closed session
Yeah,
scenario.
we could talk about that.
Yeah,
Closed
we
session.
should bring that up next time to the board.
Any other questions?
I had
Okay,
one-
work experience?
I had one question. How was the position posted? Was it posted as an adaptive PE position or a physical education?
Physical education. Yep.
And yet you put the emphasis on adaptive PE.
It's pretty commonplace now. I mean, most people should have it.
I don't believe you can get your physical education license any longer without getting the
Without it.
adaptive.
You can still get it. Lacrosse still graduates you
Without.
now with just a plain physical, with a plain physical education.
I would just say.
A lot of them go back and get licensed for it because it's hard to find a job, but
My last district, I was in, and if you didn't have adaptive certification, you were looking at possibly being, if they had to make cuts, you would be the person left that. So yeah, it's kind of become more of a minimal requirement.
All right, any other questions, Joe or Tim, before we go into closed session that you had? Or we will discuss them with Matt in closed session. We will keep Mike in closed session since he was part of the selection committee for a couple of minutes, Joe and Tim, not to.
no, that's fine. Like I said, I just,
Quinn was also part of the selection.
And Quinn, we want to stick around for closed session.
Mitch was not. Mitch was not.
Okay.
I move that we accept the administration's suggestion and hire Tommy.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Andy, motion was made by Lisa. Matt, go ahead and explain the answers to
Sure.
Tara's question.
What's that?
No.
Oh, so just to explain more of the unknown from last week, Monday, when they went to closed session, early that morning, my father passed away. So that was a big reason why they felt they couldn't make a decision at that time. I would have been there, and so out of courtesy to me, which I do very much appreciate, they tabled it for another time. In terms of the adaptive physical education certification, it's, as Luke mentioned, it's pretty much commonplace now. It's not listed and there's a requirement. I mentioned too, if you put too many certifications and requirements into a listing, you run the risk of losing quality candidates. And just because a person doesn't have a certain qualification doesn't make it wouldn't be a top candidate. That said, though, most all candidates have that. The few that didn't make the cut. Then to your question, Joe, about experience, not having current experience in the FIAT position, looking at the board policy, that is one of several attributes that we look at. When I hire a teacher, I hire the best teacher. And if I feel that that person's going to be the best fit for our building, doesn't mean the other candidate isn't high quality either, it just means for our school, what are we looking for? In the posting listing, we looked at can this person design instruction for many differences in kids? Can this person design instruction for many different types of skills? We asked several questions around that. We had them apply that knowledge to a performance task where they had to design a lesson around certain kids with certain disabilities. I looked at it, I felt strongly about the top candidate. We had an outside expert, not outside, but we had a special education expert also look at it and also selected that. Lesson plan is just an outstanding lesson. And just, I think just more than anything is, we do reference checks, we do all of this. Experience is just one piece of it, but ultimately we hired the best candidate. And as a professional evaluator, as an administrator, 18 years experience in administration and instruction, I felt very confident in this position hiring and recommendation to the board, and I haven't second guessed it. So his experience in PE, essential is part of it, but more so are they teaching kids, and that's what I expect every teacher. My ability to say is, I teach kids first.
That's great that you talked about he can create a lesson for special ed. And you had, no, you said I'm sorry, you said you had a special ed person look at it. Correct me if I'm wrong, right?
So a classroom teacher experience, myself, and as well as a special education person experience as well.
But isn't it FIED? FIED and classroom teaching and special ed are two totally different things.
We had other candidates who taught FIED who had access to the lesson plans. I said, let me know at the end of the day if you have any concerns about any of the lesson plans. I did not hear back.
Okay. And you weren't concerned with him being out of date and the changes that have been made in the national standards, the change from skill-based PE more to physical literacy? Did you talk about that at all?
I guess again, I don't know how to respond to that other than we're looking for the best teacher, and I felt like I hired the best teacher, and in my professional opinion, that's what we did. I recommended it to the board.
I guess I don't need to waste the board's time. We have a meeting set up for tomorrow after school. I guess I'll continue to, because I have some other questions that I would like to be answered a little bit more complete, so.
You have a meeting set up with Matt?
I have a meeting set up with Matt tomorrow
Okay.
after school, so I don't need to waste the board's time talking about this.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions?
One question I had is, was it, the hiring, was it for the betterment of the kids, or was it for the betterment of the administration?
What are you saying by that?
Well, sometimes it's, you know, in looking at some of the things that this individual presented, I don't think that he necessarily was the most skilled maybe versus, you know, looking at special ed, you know, that being one of his specialties. Is it something that's going to be shifting, you know, are we looking at an individual that can move from this position to this position as an advantage to the administration, or as an advantage to the individual kids?
Advantage to the kid, by far.
Any other questions, discussion from the board?
And I'll just concur that I think that the candidate Matt selected was in looking at the writing and looking at the process, the best candidate for the kids.
Was everybody in unison in your committee? Did they all agree this was the best candidate?
I think some of these questions are delving into some specifics that probably aren't appropriate in an open meeting like this.
Well, we thought we were going to be back into the closed session.
No.
Well, it's time to go home then.
Thank you.
Matt, I'll see you tomorrow then. Thank you, board, for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I said a few comments. Going through this process, it doesn't happen very often that we question in detail a choice of any administrator. The process from somebody on the outside looking in, if they knew all the details and the workings, next time just make sure there's no gray area. And this is advice to all administration.
That's impossible though. I mean, there's gray area because it's people and it's kids and it's, I mean, we're not like, no gray area is not possible. So, I mean, we need to do a really good job at outlining in our policy.
This is a $10, $11, $12 million budget we're running here. These are not only my kids, we got 700 kids we look after. There has to be very little gray area in that job.
Yeah.
Very little.
I agree. A lot of that is on the policies and how well we define them. and how clear we are and what we want from a vision, future perspective from our district, and the trust that the gray area here has come in, that when people get calls, then we start to see the gray rather than the black and white of, we've hired great
And I'm
administrators,
glad people
and
call.
we trust them, and we will support them because we believe that they're doing what's great for kids. So the way that we get no gray area right now is to button up our policy, make sure it's clear, and then hold Luke accountable to making sure his administrators are doing what they have planned to do. But, to say no gray area, that's just not gonna happen. This is a community of people, and there's gray in people.
I think it's important for us to realize, maybe moving forward, we have become a destination district. People want to teach here, okay? So this process is only going to get tougher because you are going to get many rock star candidates. And I think we had, would you agree, many rock star candidates. And the job of the committee and the job of Matt is going to be tougher.
You have people who are willing to leave their current job to come teach here. Several people, and that's.
So I think we just have to take note that this wasn't done lightly, it wasn't done, and in the future it's going to get tougher. And just appreciate that fact, that it was a tough job for the committee, tough job for Matt. From what I've gathered, it was thorough.
And I think we have to expect someone's gonna be disappointed. If we don't go into that feeling like there will be, we're never gonna have a win-win in a hiring scenario because someone will not get hired. So, and I think we're coming to terms with getting more comfortable with that. And I think that the more, the quicker we make give the impression that we believe in our administrators, that they are hiring the right people, I think some of that disappointment will, it will not lead to as much question because they know, look, they support their team. And I can, call 100 people and it's not gonna matter because the board supports the people that are actually accountable to it.
Anybody else?
And I think once we, as a board, we understand the vision, that Matt, and maybe that's just having a discussion with him, just knowing Matt better. And that's developing relationships. So, and we do that as a board, we do that as a community, all of that. So this is a really good learning lesson. This isn't a bump. This is a learning lesson.
The motion on the table is to accept the recommendation as presented by Matt.
Okay, ready to vote?
Roll call, yes.
Hay,
Yes.
Stevenson,
Yes.
Dolphin,
No.
Basting,
Abstain.
Gunlock,
Yes.
Bush,
Yes.
Steffes.
No.
Passes 4-2-1.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Again, thank you, Mike, for
Yeah,
your
thank
service
you.
to the district. Gwen and Liz, thank you.
Thank you both.
Motion to adjourn.
Sure.
Second? Second to adjourn.
Wasn't.
Second by Mayor. All in favor, say aye. Opposed?